Hey guys, and welcome to Taylor Tech. So today we're going to be untangling my home network finally by no longer using pfSense to switch between media types, whether it's SFP or RJ45, and use an actual physical switch to do it the way that, you know, God and Cisco intended. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the setup and install of this switch into my lab. What this is a Cisco Nexus N3K C3048TP. It is a switch that has 48 1 gigabit ports and 4 10 gigabit SFP ports. It's part of their Nexus data center line of switches. It uses a different software than most people are familiar with Cisco switches. Most people are familiar with their Catalyst line of products that has iOS as the operating system. This is their Nexus line, which has NXOS, which is completely different. But we'll go over that. We're also we'll talk briefly. Well, so the things we're going to run through are a quick overview of what this switch is capable of. We'll talk about the things to watch out for on eBay listings for something like this. We'll go over the setup and configuration before we haul it over the rack. We'll actually get it rack mounted, and then we'll start the process of untangling my network and getting everything onto one net. So first, let's talk about this switch. So this guy is one of their data center line of switches. It's an older, what most people will consider either distribution or top of rack switch, depending on what kind of media you're running. If you're mostly on 1 gigabit RJ45, it's a distribution switch. If that's more like what your end users or your client machines are running, then it's more of a distribution switch. I'm going to be using it really as a distribution switch. My 6120XP is really more acting like a top of rack right now because all of my servers are really connected to that, whereas this will be doing other duties. It's a full layer 2 switch. It can do VLANs and fully managed. It also is apparently capable of layer 3 and even BGP routing, although you have to have specific licenses from Cisco to do layer 3 and BGP. I think I'm using those terms correctly. I already checked this switch after I got it. It doesn't have any additional licenses. It only has the base one, so I'll only be using it for layer 2. So a few things you want to watch out for with these guys is, one, make sure you're actually getting the rack mounting software or hardware with it, not just the switch itself. Very similar to like their fabric extenders, they have rack ears that go in the front, and then rails that come in the back for a full mount depth. According to Cisco, you can mount it on just a two rack post, although it seems just a little bit heavy to me for not using the rails, especially if you're going to mount it so that you're mounting it at the end. It's just probably going to be too much torque. It's going to bend your rails up. I'm actually short a set of rails, so we're going to have to be creative when we mount it, but we'll go over that when we get to mounting. They come with the option for dual power supplies. What? For dual power supplies back here, they're hot swap power supplies, so you can just pull straight out and go straight back in. You've also got a hot swap fan right here. One thing I do want to go over, you'll notice that the fan back here has a black stripe on it. The power supplies don't. These switches have the option for either rear exhaust or port side exhaust. Depending on where the hot or which direction you're mounting it, whether it's ports in the front or ports to the rear, or if you're and which side is the hot or cold side of your rack. For me, I'm mounting everything with ports to the rear as the hot side. So this fan is actually with the black stripe, and you'll see that on the power supplies too. If it has a black stripe on it, it's a rear exhaust. If it doesn't have it, it is a port exhaust. So that's something we're going to have to go over how to fix. I've done a little research on it, and I think I know how to do it. I mean, it's a really simple fan tray, very similar to 6120XP, except with smaller fans that are much quieter. So let me get this guy out. So it's a very similar style fan tray. You've got a little bit different adapter right here, but the fans themselves are very easy to turn around. The difficulty is convincing the switch that the fans are pointed in the right direction. It doesn't really throw a huge fit about it. It just gives you a warning message on boot. So what we'll do as part of this is we'll flip those fans around. Before we do that though, we need to go over the setup process for this guy, because more than likely when you get it, it's going to have done it. They're going to have done a factory reset on it, which means that there's no Kickstarter loaded, no boot, no system image loaded. You're just going to get stuck in the bootloader with nowhere to go. So let's get it plugged in. We'll go over and we'll go through the process of doing the initial setup and permanently setting your boot variables so that if the switch ever restarts, you have your Kickstarter and your system image loaded for you. Okay, so we're going to go through the initial setup and configuration. I've got a PuTTY window open and set to the COM port from my USB to serial adapter. So let me plug in the switch, and it's going to go through the boot process, and we'll show you what your switch is probably going to look like if you get something similar to this. If you're not familiar with how Cisco's higher-end switches work, and I don't know, I think their Catalyst stuff works the same way. You have basically three things going on. You have a bootloader, a Kickstarter, and then the actual system image that has the actual switching software on it. As you can see right now, we just loaded up to something called loader, and it's not the full switch, and it's not doing anything else. If you weren't sure what to do at this point, you might think that your switch is bricked. That's not the case. They've reset the defaults for the switch, so there's nothing, there's no default configuration for it to load. So we have to go through and actually do that. Remember, if you're ever lost in a Cisco device, the question mark is your friend. You can always type question mark, enter it, and it'll tell you what you can do. So what we can see, we can look at our directory and we can tell it to boot to an image. So since we know that we go bootloader, which we're in, to Kickstarter, which is what we want to load, to the actual system image, which is the second thing we'll load. So we're going to look at our directory and just see what there is. Okay, that's weird. It reset us to the top. I guess it's being silly. All right, so I've played with this one before. I know there's something wrong with this U3 image, so we're actually going to use this image here. We're going to boot to that guy, and that's going to load the Kickstarter. So this is going to take a few seconds. Once the Kickstarter is loaded, we'll have a more enhanced shell in which to actually load the the system image, and then once we have the system image, we can set the configuration so that it always boots to this, because we can go through this once, and if we don't set a boot image for the Kickstarter and for the system software, it'll actually do this every single time the power is cut to it. It'll come straight back to the loader and you'll have to manually do it. So it pays off to go ahead and set that image. As you can see, it's not very clean, leaving text everywhere, not clearing the console as it loads. But once the Kickstarter is loaded, like I said, it's much cleaner. So all right, so now we're into the Kickstarter. As always, question mark is our friend. You can see we've got options. So what we want to do is we want to load a system image right here. So let's go to our dir again, and we can see what images are available. Note we have more information here in our directory, and it's sorted better. It's just a more robust shell. So we want to load this guy. Load. And it'll start loading the actual switching software. This again takes a few seconds. You'll note, you can't see it here, but the lights on the front of the switch on the modules will start lighting up as it loads things. Looked like it gave me a prompt there, but it really didn't because it's still initializing. So we're about to get a warning here. And as we mentioned earlier, I have port side exhaust power supplies and rear exhaust fans tray. So we've got this fan direction mismatch detected warning. We're going to do a quick mod that should fix that. And once we get the switch installed, we'll verify that that mod is working as intended. It's very easy to flip the fans around. It's harder to make the switch think that the fans are flipped around. As you can probably notice by the sound from the microphone, it's pretty dang quiet switch. You can barely hear it. And now that it's loaded, it's even quieter. All right, so do you want to enforce a secure password standard? No. And password for admin. Confirm. So that you're going to have to go through this setup too if you are doing a initial setup on your switch. You should be. Most eBay sellers are going to reset them to factory default. Would you like to enter the basic config? Yes. No more logins. No switch name. dhprod prd core sw out of band config. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and configure out of band management because I want to be able to get into it. So we're changing up the structure of the network here in the house. I was using a /24, and I'm going to go to a /16 for my subnet, for my network. So I'm going to do this. What's an open IP? I think 10. Is 10 open? I think 9's open. I can't remember. I think 9's open. So 255.255.0.0. Default gateway for management, yes. 10.0.1.1. Believe no. 0.1. 10.0.10.1. Yes. Enable telnet. No. We don't want telnet. Yes, we want SSH. Type of SSH key, RSA. 2048. Why not? No. We don't need the NTP service. Default. That looks good. Yes, use that configuration and save it. Okay, so it's going to take it a minute to generate all the configuration information that we just inputted and to save it to the switch so that it is permanently there. This we won't have to re-input even if we reboot it without setting boot variables. And we're done, so we can log in. All right, so again, question mark is our friend. First, what we're going to do is do show boot, and then we'll actually configure it. So show, there's lots of things you can show. We're going to do show boot so we can see the boot variables. So Control C cancels just like in a Linux shell. So show boot. And as we can see, nothing is currently set, nothing is set on next reload. So we want to go to config. One per line. So boot. Kick start. Actually, I want it. Kick start and tab completes commands. It's great. It's just like a Linux shell. So here's my kickstart that I want to set. Boot system. Set to this guy. And then end show boot. So we can see now we've set our kickstart variable and our system variable to boot to the image that we're currently in. Now what we need to do is we need to set those boot variables to boot on the next reload. What was the command for this? No, I don't want to reinitialize the startup config. God, what was the command? I don't want to write erase. Write erase is wrong. Write erase will clear my config. All right. Okay. Finally, got to figure it out. All right. So it's install all kickstart boot flash. Then I want it to install this guy. And that should set it, I believe. Okay. It's rebooting the switch. I'm 95% sure at this point that doing the install of the Kickstarter should have successfully set the boot variable, but we will find out very shortly. Yep, see, so went ahead and directly started the Kickstarter here. Didn't have to do a thing. We'll go and we'll show the boot variables once it's loaded back up so that we can see that it is permanently set. All right, back to our login prompt. So we can go admin and our password, and then show boot. Ba-ding! It is set. It'll always boot to this now if it's ever unplugged, lose power for any reason. So we're good to go here. Now let's get it actually installed in the rack. Okay, so now that we've gone over basic setup and configuration, let's go over, let's go ahead and flip these fans around so that we're blowing air out the correct side. Let's see, I think the power supply was in the way last time. Yeah, there we go. All right, so you can see very simply you've got 2 screws per fan holding the fans in, and what we just want to do is we want to flip those guys around so that they're blowing air this direction instead of pulling air this direction. So 2 simple screws and off we go. Okay, first fan is loose. There's our directional arrows. Well, we know which way we need to be going. Let's see. How is that done? Oh, it's just taped in. Okay. So you can see they've got slits cut for this, and these guys are just taped into those slits. We're going to bust that tape out because we need the wires coming out the other direction, and there's not enough room to kind of cram them. Now, to help keep this stuff organized, I'm going to try and keep it how they have it here with all the wires on the bottom. The only thing I don't like about this, really, is the way these LED wires on the side work. Let's see, is that going to work? Are these not square? Because it was like that. So really it'd be like this. Something tells me these are not, yeah, these aren't square. They seem like they're just barely off square because I couldn't rotate it the other direction. Okay, that's fine. It's not a huge like airflow issue or anything with the amount of wires. It's not like these are dual fans or anything crazy like that. And now repeat 3 more times and you're all set. Your fans are pointed in the right direction and you'll get good airflow on the port side. Now you can go just buy, you can just go buy a front exhaust fan, rear exhaust fan if you want to, a port side exhaust fan if you want to, but the problem is most of the guys who have the correct fans for port side exhaust want as much for the fans as the dang switch itself costs. So that's kind of prohibitive in my mind. The angle there kind of sucks, but fortunately it's Phillips, so you can kind of have a little bit of an angle without stripping. So you have to be careful with these lock washers. They require a little more force, so you really have to push it in a lot to get the leverage you need. And guys, this is about as simple as mods get on data center hardware or servers. I'm literally just turning the fans around so that they're going to point the direction I want them to point. 2 fans done. 3 fans done. That's what she said. Ha ha ha. And Michael Scott coming out. There we go. Alright, all 4 fans are now flipped. I'm going to do one thing to kind of manage this a little bit better. And that is I'm going to pull these loops to tighten these wires a little bit. I'm not really changing anything per se. I'm simply taking the slack and putting it into the loops. It's not really a necessary step unless you're a neat freak. And even then, you can only do so much for it. There, it's a little bit better. Alright, so that's modded now. The one other thing that you can do, and I'll see if I can do a close-up shot of this, is there's an actual jumper wire that is added to the port side exhaust modules, because I looked at some close-up high-res photos of these modules and tried to look for ones that showed this connector in the back. As far as I could tell, everything is the exact same, except there's an additional black jumper wire that connects this guy right here for this fan to this top right post, which currently doesn't have a wire in it. So I think that is how it's actually distinguishing port side from exhaust side. Otherwise, all of the wiring is the exact same on these modules. So it's a later date. I may try and make that mod happen. If that's something you'd like to see, go ahead and comment down below. And we'll see if we can get rid of that annoying warning when it boots about fan direction mismatch. So that is set. Let's plug it in real quick. I'll just validate that all of our air is going the right direction like we want. Second. Yeah. Much better. I can feel it's pulling back here now. And there's air coming out, more air coming out up here. That's awesome. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to see. I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about the other issue that a lot of people will bring up with data center hardware is the noise level. This right now is about as loud as I've ever heard this thing get. It'll actually quiet down once it finishes its boot cycle. Once this blue light goes off and all the orange lights across the front, you'll hear it step down quite a bit. And at that point, it's no louder than pretty much anything else that I've got. I mean, I've had desktop systems that were louder than this thing, so you know, from that standpoint, noise-wise, not a problem. Heat-wise, not really a problem. Power draw, only 120 watts at max load. So that, again, not a big deal, especially if you've got any other, you know, switch with a lot of ports in it and you're thinking about just going to 10 gigabit with a few additional ports. This guy is not a huge additional power draw. There you go. Just heard the fans go down. And this is more what the normal operating sound level is like. Not that bad, really. So, okay. Let's go ahead. And it'll actually, you know what? It'll actually step down one additional time once it finishes booting up all the way. That's just, it's through the bootloader now. So let's go ahead and unplug it. And let's talk about one additional thing. And that is eBay sellers who need to be more careful with what they send. You'll note right here, and I'll try and get a close-up shot of it, there's something wrong right here. There's actually a screw post sticking out. And it seems that someone snapped off a screw when they were taking off the rails last time. I don't have an appropriate... I don't have a reverse tap to pull that screw out appropriately, so I'm going to get a pair of pliers and see if I can back it out very carefully real quick. And then once that's done, we'll be ready to rack it. So let's get some pliers. Owie! Loud! Alright, let's see. She's starting to turn. Fortunately, there was just the tiniest little bit sticking out and I could get a grip on it so that I can get that guy out, because that's going to suck if I'm missing one of the posts or one of the screws to put my rack ears on. So, yeah, I'm not going to name my eBay seller because generally they're actually really good to work with, and I've not had problems with them before when buying other equipment. I guess this one just slipped through. But yeah, just keep an eye on that kind of thing. If you're not comfortable with doing that yourself, make sure that you take the opportunity to discuss with the seller about getting the equipment fixed or replaced. So now that we've gone through the setup process and discussed some of the things to watch out for with the switch and talked about the switch's capabilities, let's go ahead and get the rack equipment, the ears and the rail guides installed on this guy. Then we'll take it over to the rack and we'll get it racked up and we'll start moving ports and plugs around. So we've got the rack ears for the front and the rails for the back. So you can see on the side here, you've got your 6 holes in the front, 6 holes in the back, rails, ears. If you're mounting it for like a reverse mount or something, you can of course mount it a little bit differently. God, they gave me a whack ton of screws. Alright. So I'm going to mount this guy like, oh, where's the holes? So this is the depth mounting that I've got on my other Nexus stuff in my rack right now, because I've got a 6120XP and a fabric extender. So we're going to go ahead and mount these guys like this. Now you can of course mount this 11 ways to Sunday. I believe the recommended way, if you're going to do a 2-post mounting, is to have this part of the ear back here so it's a little more evenly weighted, because it's a pretty heavy thing, and if you're putting all the weight on the front, it's going to torque backwards. It's going to bend your rack rails, and you don't want that. Next, we will put the rack rail guide right here. All right, let's do the other side, and we're ready to take it over to the rack. Okay, so let's go through the actual racking process. The first step is, of course, to put in your captive nuts so that you have somewhere to screw it into. Most racks are going to need them at least anyway. Make sure you do it on both sides as well. You don't want to get with half of the device hanging off the rack and realize you didn't put nuts in the other side and they're sitting on the table a foot away from you and you can't reach them. Next, it's time to actually physically insert the switch. I'm trying to be careful here because my rack is an absolute disaster in terms of cable management as I'm slowly putting things into it, and I'm constantly getting it hooked on crap as I'm trying to put things into it. So just be careful and don't get something caught so that you drop it. Next, actually lift the device into place and start putting screws in. It really helps if you make sure that you don't do all the screws on one side at once and then switch to the other side, do one on one, one on the other, and that way you kind of keep it balanced and it's less likely to fall and get damaged. Once you have all the screws actually in, get your handy screwdriver out and tighten it up. After that, realize you've made a crucial mistake by leaving a 1U gap that you forgot you didn't need, and proceed to take it back out. Once you get all the screws back out, go ahead and put it where it needs to be, since you've already put captive nuts in the higher 1U slot, and start screwing it back in. And again, make sure you put one on each side before you go and do all of the screws in the 1U segment. Okay, so for this next part, we're going to move the rails from the device above it, which is a fabric extender that is being used by this 6120XP. And we're going to move those rails down so that basically the switch is holding up the VEX. There you go. In this case, I have to put a little bit of tension on that rail because it's actually going to be holding quite a bit of weight. Now we're going to do the other side so that we have it fully supported from the bottom. This is why that 1U gap wasn't going to work, because I forgot that I intended to steal the rails from the VEX because I only have one set of these long rails for the in 3K and in 2K series devices. Now that everything's in there, we're going to check it, make sure it's not going anywhere, looks good, and it's time to actually start plugging crap in. So let's get that turned around so you can see it. Not that I want you to see that horrible spaghetti. First, we're going to put power to it. So I'm plugging it directly into my UPS below because I really need to get proper rack PDUs. Now I'm going to plug the 10 gigabit into my the 10 gigabit ports into my 6120XP so that I can bridge between my UCS devices and the switch itself. You can see the switch is booting up. So we can see here it's going through its boot cycle. There's all the lights going across. It's almost done. All right. Should be done booting now. And I have a link on the one RJ45 item I have in there, so I'm going to start hooking up 10 gig. So 10 gig into the fabric interconnect. And then I'm going to start moving all the other RJ45 stuff down from my N900 router and into the actual switch.
and everything looks good. Well, good is a relative term, I guess. It doesn't really look good. Please stop looking. You don't want to see this. It's not good.
Okay, so now that we've done the physical install and moved the media around, got everything set up the way that it needs to be, the last thing that's left is to go through and correct all of my network connections and pfSense and any DNS entries that I had that were pointing to now incorrect IP addresses so that it aligns with my new unified network. So let's hop over the PC and we'll do that real quick.
Hey guys, it's Editing Taylor here. The section there on reconfiguring the network to work with the new switch kind of got cut because I kind of had to in the middle of it. I realized there was something much worse going on after a few minutes. I'm not sure exactly what I did. Somehow I orphaned my Zental VM and it started going nuts. It pegged out its CPU. I couldn't get to it through Hyper-V Manager. I tried rebooting it, and it was doing the same thing. And then I had to go to bed that night, and I couldn't mess with it anymore because it was well past midnight. And the next day, I came in and tried to mess with it, and my credentials had expired, and I couldn't get new credentials because the Zental VM was not responding. So I lost AD access to my home, and I realized I had no backups. And so I basically spent the entire weekend rebuilding my entire home network, every computer, getting everything back on the domain. So yeah, learned a nice lesson about backups. You want backups. I don't even know why I'm shaking this at the camera. If you're going to run this kind of stuff at home and you're going to put your family on it, make sure you have backups of it. And we're going to do a video on that very shortly because that's something that needs to be done. So yeah, I did eventually get it all working though. Everything is hooked up now. The switch is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's switching between all my devices. Everything's on one network, which is nice. I just wish I hadn't had to go through the pain of an entire weekend rebuilding my hypervisor from the ground up and reinstalling all my VMs. And yeah, that was not fun. So anyway, let's go ahead and conclude the video.
All right, guys. Well, finally, it is done. That was a heck of a project, but it feels so much better to have my network simplified. There were so many things and so little issues that I had by being on a divided network. Certain services just didn't want to go through a routed network to work. Things like Steam and home streaming and whatnot just do not work over a routed network for whatever reason. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm really excited about what opportunities this is gonna open up for me. I've got some other projects that I'm gonna be able to do faster now. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions for me, feel free to throw it in the comments section down below. I'll be sure to get back to those as quickly as I can. If you would like to support what I'm doing on this channel, you can do so using my Amazon affiliate link in the description section. Also, I'm trying out eBay affiliate links. That's something that apparently you can do now. I didn't realize it, and I should have been doing it. So there will be eBay affiliate links in the description section. I'll try to link to relevant hardware as I have it on the show if it's something that is really only available through eBay, like a used C3048TP. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a good one. We'll see you on the next one.